combo.
And, you know, we've seen this recipe with Esper Stoneblade before. The game one against combo decks, not the best in the world, though. Unlike many combo decks, Adam is susceptible to Umezawa's Jitte, so that gives Jim another angle of attack in the matchup. He's going to be really relying on his creature removal, his force of wills to keep Adam's board contained, and try to set up Umezawa's Jitte. After board, he gets to be a little more efficient at doing this, but game one on the draw is going to be an uphill battle.
All right, and we are underway. Adam Warner, turn one, fetches out a forest. He is going to go, and we'll see basically the elf parade begin. We see in Jim's hand the destruction it looks like he has involves a Swords to Plowshares. But first elf on the board is going to be a Quirion Ranger.
Adam leads off with what I believe is a 5th edition basic forest, which if that is the case, that is a hanging offense.
So what? It's pretty. It's purple. I like it. It's a. You never.
I can't tell
you
for sure.
You expect a forest to be green, but this one's purple.
Jim picks up a Force of Will, which is pretty important in this matchup. He needs to protect himself from Glimpse, but ultimately he's going to have to fight Adam's board getting out of control. He has, I'm checking to see, 2 main deck copies of Supreme Verdict, so if you can buy time to that, that's quite good. And Stoneforge Mystic for Jitte, again, one of his best weapons in the matchup.
All right, so a Flooded Strand cracked by Jim. He's going to see what he grabs here. Kind of the cat's out of the bag on Adam's deck. Jim gives Jim information on how to proceed from here.
Yep.
And maybe a Thoughtseize, going for a turn 1 Underground Sea. And that'll be almost Thoughtseize. It's Inquisition of Kozilek. And we'll get to see what Adam has kept. So in addition to the Quirion Ranger, he has Natural Order, Birchlore Rangers, Heritage Druid, and Gaia's Cradle.
So pretty explosive hand there for Adam. Jim, of course, can't take the Natural Order out of that hand, so he's going to select probably one of the mana generators, I would assume, but Adam has a hand that's capable of getting a Natural Order off. What are his large targets here? A Craterhoof Behemoth and a Regal Force?
Yeah, he does. He still does have the one of Regal Force in the deck. So he can get that, and he does have a Craterhoof. And yeah, we'll see with, yeah, okay, can't take the Natural Order. It's a little bit difficult. The 2 cards he really wants to take out of this hand are the 2 he can't take.
Mm-hmm. Gaia's Cradle, very powerful in this deck, and became even more powerful with the rules change to Legendary Permanence with M13. Now you can play a Gaia's Cradle, tap it for mana, play a second Cradle, and instead of having to destroy both of them, you can keep one of them. So another additional boost in power to this deck.
Right, and a pass back from Davis. He does have the Force of Will if Adam tries to go for Gaia's Cradle. And we see on Adam's side, he has drawn an Elvish Visionary for the turn. Visionary, one of the great card advantage engines of the deck. Well, half of the engine, the other half being Wirewood Symbiote. And we see here the Gaia's Cradle into play. A second creature for Adam that will let his Cradle tap for 2. And I imagine we will see, let's see, both of them tap for a green thanks to Birchlore's ability. So then we get Quirion Ranger into play. Now we'll have the opportunity to make 3 mana with Cradle. He'll have 1 floating when he goes for the Visionary. Just getting his creatures onto the board as fast as possible here. Yeah. So 3 mana, now 4 mana. He uses the Quirion Ranger's ability to untap a creature, bring back the forest. He's going to go for the Natural Order immediately, actually, not the Visionary, and he's going to challenge Davis to have that Force of Will.
Yeah. And this is actually, given that Jim does have a Force of Will, this is much better for Jim than if he played the Elvish Visionary. Because the Elvish Visionary in this spot almost might compel a Force of Will out of Jim anyway, so this is much better.
Receive Force pitching Jace. Is a 2 for 2 as that costs a Quirion Ranger and a Natural Order from Adam. Force of Will and Jace for Jim. A little bit of a setback for Adam, however, he did still get to keep his Visionary. He has 1 Ranger. It's really the second one of not as much value. It's probably, like, I think, a worthwhile gamble for him to see if it would work.
Yeah, I'm not criticizing the play insofar as I think it's incorrect. I think he picked a pretty good spot there to go for it. And certainly against a deck with blue and black mana, you don't know if you're going to get another opportunity. But Jim had the answer ready and keeps his head above water for the time being.
All right, second land from Jim. Now on turn 2, he has another Force of Will plus blue card and a Swords to Plowshares, in addition to a 3rd land in hand. See how he chooses to use his Disruption. It's going to be Swords on Birchlore Rangers. And then it passes a turn.
And both players being stripped of resources here. Of course, the creature removal spells and the Force of Will's natural order is getting used. This pace really favors Jim because he has so many individual haymakers he can draw from this position. Adam's about building up a saturation of permanence in play and setting up big spells. So,
all right, a swing for 1 from Quirion Ranger and an Elvish Visionary will be the turn for Adam. He drew a second Gaia's Cradle. That's not particularly helpful. His draw off the Ranger was a Glimpse of Nature. But with no creatures in his hand, the card's stranded for the time being.
So now Jim with 2 lands in play, 2 lands in hand, Brainstorm and Force of Will. Curious to see if Jim brainstorms this turn.
Yeah, he's played a really good defensive game, but the fact that he had to pitch Jace to that Force of Will means right now he has no follow-up to close the game with. And Adam, draw for turn is Deathrite Shaman. Now he's contemplating whether he's going to start. Looks like he will probably start a Glimpse Chain.
Doesn't have a lot of setup here, but it's really unlikely for him to be able to totally go off with Glimpse. So we might just hope to find a little bit of value here.
Yeah, well, talking with Elves players, since Craterhoof's now in the deck, a lot of them don't see Glimpse as a combo card anymore. It's just a card advantage card. You know, if you can fire it off and get 2, 3 cards off it, they usually just go for it. The question will be whether or not Jim lets this Glimpse resolve. With Birchlow Rangers in play, there's a chance he's aware of the fact that this could be very dangerous. Say if Adam's next card is a Nettle Sentinel, there's the potential for Adam to win this turn.
On the other side of this, Jim doesn't have a lot of resources left if he fights over this.
It would take his whole hand to fight. So you have to kind of gauge how many cards he thinks Adam can draw off this. If it's 1 or 2, he probably lets it resolve. If it's 3, then it probably is worth the Force. And decides it's too much of a risk, and that'll be the remainder of Jim's hand to take out Glimpse of Nature.
But Jim, again, from here has a lot of big draws. He has, you know, Jace, for example, True Name Nemesis, Stoneforge Mystic especially, Supreme Verdict, and of course, his cantrips can also find more copies of these cards.
Yeah. And here comes the Plan B strength of Elves. You know, now that its combo has been disassembled, Adam will swing for 2, pass the turn. He then has, 3 creatures in play and represents 3 to 4 damage a turn.
Yeah, Elves actually can win with sort of its beatdown draws a good percentage of the time because decks have to devote so much of their disruption to keeping them off of Glimpse of Nature, Natural Order, and all that kind of stuff that all the random little beatdown artists can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, and that, if you look at the next draw for Adam, it was a Heritage Druid. Kind of vindicates Jim's decision. Had he let the Glimpse resolve, that Heritage Druid would have been really powerful for Adam. He could have potentially drawn a lot of cards off the Glimpse. Yep. And he serves up 3 more damage. He passes back. He chose to attack with Deathrite. He doesn't have the black yet, so he can't actually X out spells for additional damage.
Yeah, most of these lists have a mixture of bayous, occasionally savannas for Galactide in the sideboard or something similar. So Jim has picked up a Jace the Mind Sculptor here.
Yeah.
So there's the option of brainstorming right now, but that definitely means that he loses Jace next turn. There is the option of him Fate Sealing this turn and then brainstorming next turn, which is a really powerful sequence if he can find Supreme Verdict in the top of 3 cards
This is one of the few situations that I've been playing enough Standard that when I first saw Jace, I thought, oh, what a great draw for Jim, because I've been playing with so much Jace Architect of Thought. I thought, I think it's one of the few times where you could say, like, I think this is the worst Jace to have. But nonetheless, Jace the Mind Sculptor is still incredibly powerful here.
Yeah. So Adam gets Fate Sealed there. Jim sees Llanowar Elf on the top of the deck, which Jim is happy to have him keep.
Well, one question is how many, if any, Supreme Verdicts are in the main deck for Jim?
Jim has 2, so he has a lot of shots at it.
Yeah.
He has enough mana where other cantrips potentially give him redraws, so he really needs to find it pretty quickly here as he's just getting whittled down by Adam's Force, but he'll get a lot of shots at it next turn.
And we see a swing for 4. This is going to go presumably most of it at Jace.
It looks like he's ignoring it altogether.
All right, so it's actually just a Jim. Jim's down to 7.
Because he can kill it next turn with his 5 creatures in play if he's feeling so inclined, and sort of whittling Jace down halfway doesn't make a ton of sense.
So we see Batterskull, Stoneforge Mystic, and Land as the cards off Jace, and that'll put a stop to Adam's aggro plan. Jim there found a 5th land and a Batterskull. And that's one thing which maybe, so let's go back to that attack. If Adam had attacked Jace, he could suicide an elf across to finish off the Jace this turn, but now that Jace is at 5, the Batterskull actually will provide an adequate defense for
no, there's a lot of risky draws in Jim's in Jim's deck from this vantage point, but Batterskull, one of the weirder ones that punishes him for that attack.
Absolutely. Jim, classic brainstorm play, cracks a fetch land, gets to reshuffle the top of his deck, and will make Batterskull. Not too many ways. There's the one Viridian Shaman in Adam's deck to deal with this. He would have, and the 4 Green Sun Zeniths to find it, so he has 5 ways to get it.
You see the Brian Braun to win token there for the Germ. And now Adam's beatdown plan in a little bit of trouble.
And start off the turn is Nettle Sentinel. Strong card, but no help here. And now Jim has the board clogged up and has a Jace behind that wall. Will not take too many activations for him to pull away.
And he's gotten a reshuffle too, so he gets more cracks at Supreme Verdict, which is really the card he's looking for to lock this game up.
Yeah, on the other side, there's a lot of draws from Adam that just win right now. Say he draws Natural Order, that would be good enough to win. So Jim is by no means out of the woods.
Even a naturally drawn Craterhoof Behemoth is a ton of damage.
Yeah, and because of that second Cradle in Adam's hand, Adam could just cast the Craterhoof here. He does only play 1 Craterhoof in the deck. I've seen some builds start to play more than 1 just beyond the raw power of the card.
But Jim's getting a good defense set up here. Still a couple draws he has to worry about, of course, but...
Stoneforge in his hand, he's going to brainstorm. He finds Force of Will, land, Swords to Plowshares. So while he does not have the Verdict yet, he is able to get Stoneforge and Swords to Plowshares. Looks like he's going to go ahead and not take the Vindicate this turn. Opting instead to use the Stoneforge to shuffle. And then keeping Swords up.
And this is another piece of the puzzle now. Umezawa's Jitte can start doing some real control on Adam's board.
Yeah, and thanks to that 6th land that Jim had, Umezawa's Jitte is going to get to work immediately. If he wants to tap out, he can tap out, and he will, and put it on Batterskull and start massacring elves. This means Adam really about has 1 draw to win here.
This is, one of the weaknesses of elves compared to other combo decks in the format is susceptibleness to Umezawa's Jitte. You see a lot, of course, in Stoneforge Mystic decks. Many other decks just have a copy or 2 in the sideboard, and it is a troubling card for elves to play against.
All right, and 2 counters onto the Jitte. Adam goes down to 16. Jim back up to 10. We'll see what he chooses to do. My guess is he'll just kill off 2 elves. Probably wants to do it now so that Adam's Cradles have less impact. So first it'll be Heritage Druid.
Heritage Druid represents the most mana of anything in play, so that's definitely where Jim wants to start.
Yeah, and the second will either be Quirion Ranger or Elvish Visionary, most likely. Those could possibly be Llanowar Elves, so it's probably be Ranger over that. He's kind of figuring out which one he wants to kill. He's gonna go with Quirion Ranger. So 4 elves remain. Adam still has enough critical mass to win this turn if he manages to get the Craterhoof, and Step Adam will gain 2 by eating one of his own creatures. And see if he gets there. It looks like he drew another land. And that certainly won't do for Adams. That means he will take another hit from the Germ token. And there are some draws that help him here too. If Adam, for example, had drawn Wirewood Symbiote, that would also stem the bleeding right now. He would be able to deny Jitte counters to Jim, but...
Yeah, anything that allows him to block and then pick up the blocker before damage.
Right. He's gonna take another hit off that Germ token.
Inquisition, Stoneforge, Mystic, Source of Plowshares, and lands the options for Jim here.
Yeah, he already has all his equipment, so Stoneforge Mystic not particularly helpful other than that it's a free shuffle. But swords, certainly a card he wants to keep. And now with the 2 more creatures that this Batterskull Germ token can kill, it's uncertain whether or not a Crater Hoof is enough anymore.
Yeah. Obviously his team's getting whittled down here. He's getting denied mana, of course, because he's losing mana from his Gaia's Cradles. It's only getting worse.
And he's in an Inquisition of Kozilek. He sees the second Gaia's Cradle, not concerned with it. And we will now see the second Stoneforge Mystic there. And does he have a 3rd piece of equipment in his deck? We will see. Yes.
He has a Sword of Fire and Ice.
Absolutely. I'll not be able to play that this turn, but next turn he will have it online.
Accelerates the clock a little bit further, is potentially more creature removal if he's feeling so inclined.
And it's going to go ahead and attack. That puts life totals even at 14. He's going to use GT counters to take care of 2 more 1/1s. Both Llanowar Elves and Quirion Ranger are in the bin. Now it is just Nettle Sentinel, Deathrite Shaman, and Elvish Visionary that remain in front of a growing horde of creatures on Jim's side.
And Jim's still with access to the Source of Plowshares in his hand as well, in case things go awry this.
Yeah, I think he's going to use it on Deathrite Shaman. He's just trying to clear the board as fast as he can. Adam will gain 2 to go up to 16, but is now just left with 2 creatures.
And he doesn't even care about, say, a top-decked Wirewood Symbiote at this point because he has Jace to unsummon things. So just trying to constrict Adam's resources as much as he possibly can.
And we see here, draw from Adam, and we'll see what he can do with it. It's another Elvish Visionary who gets a 1 redraw. It's going into a Heritage Druid. A lot of mana, but nothing to do with the mana.
And things, you know, every turn only gets worse.
Right. Adam was going to make Jim execute here, but Jim will take the rest of Adam's creatures this turn. As the end step puts Sword of Fire Ice into play, it's going to suit up the sword onto that Germ token. Or onto a Stoneforge. And he swings with both. And now all his creatures will have to be on chump blocks. 1 Elvish Visionary in front of the Stoneforge Mystic. Batterskull drains 4 more from Adam. The 13 and 18 become life totals. 2 counters in the GT. That will go ahead and take care of yet another creature.
Jace still not activated this turn.
Right. At this point, Jace wouldn't be surprised to see him start Fate Sealing. Yeah, and we have 1 counter takes care of the Visionary. Just Nettle Sentinel left on the board. And Jace will actually go ahead and unsummon the Nettle Sentinel.
Yeah. Just trying to do everything he can to possibly prevent Adam from having an explosive turn. Make him repay that mana, make him generate less mana off his Cradle, you know.
Yeah, 2 lands, no creatures means Adam is on 1 land here. He's going to tap it for Nettle Sentinel. He's going to use now 1 mana for a second Nettle Sentinel and pass back. Those creatures, too, is about to both be thrown under the bus. And Jim's counting up here. So game 1 pretty much is going to go to Jim Davis here. He's just figuring out how he wants to make the math happen. But things for a while here were looking pretty bad for Jim until he was able to find really a turning point in the game. Yeah, I mean, would you say that it really was the Batterskull there that turned it around?
Well, he was able to keep Adam off of doing anything too powerful. I mean, Adam had a lot of pressure in play. He had a lot of creatures, but Esper Zoneblade's pretty good at beating 1/1s and 2/2s. You know, he was a little under the gun, but
yeah. So going back to there's that one attack where Adam chose to go at Jim's life total instead of at Jace, and I wanted thoughts on that play, I guess, in particular.
Well, the way that it worked out was quite poor. Obviously, Jim generated Batterskull, and then Jace was untouched for the remainder of the game. But it's Also pretty risky in that spot for Adam to just attack Jim for 0 that turn, still allow him to brainstorm when it looks like you're probably going to have to win through damage. So Adam definitely got punished by Jim finding, Batter Skull specifically in that spot. I guess there's a lot of blockers it could have been potentially to punish Adam for that decision, but on board it's not clear if that was a mistake.
Right.
The 4 damage really mattered for Adam in that spot. It wasn't like that was... It's not like that wasn't pertaining to the outcome of the game. He wasn't comboing out there. He was trying to damage race.
Right. Well, just because a play didn't work out doesn't necessarily mean that it was the wrong play.
Right.
Perhaps he's still playing to the correct out.
So going to the sideboard here, this is another place where Esper Stoneblade in general picks up advantages in post-board games. They get to cut some of the inefficient stuff for more specific answers to what's going on. Jim gets to bring in 2 copies of Zealous Persecution and an additional Supreme Verdict. Those are, of course, excellent here. He has access to Vendilion Click, Surgical Extraction, a Path to Exile, a Flusterstorm, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Meddling Mage, a Grafdigger's Cage, a Memory Gasari, and 2 Thoughtseizes.
Yeah, so like you said, Supreme Verdict, Zealous Persecution, Path to Exile. Removal spells are excellent against the creature deck. I expect those to come in. Beyond that, I'm not sure how many of these cards are relevant. He does have a Vendilion Click, which may be better than some of the things like True Name Nemesis that he's playing. He may bring them in just because he has enough cards that he doesn't want. But Vendilion Click not at its best against Elves, since Elves typically empties their hand very, by turn 3.
How much discard do you imagine Jim wants in this matchup?
Well, he may keep it simply because he's got other things to board out. Discard's not great. If Jim's on the play, discard's fine. It's something he can do on turn 1. Those first Elves is a deck that can turn 3 often. So any spell that you can play on turns 1 or 2 are worth considering for Jim. That said, Thoughtseize is weak. If it's not on turn 1 or 2, it's very likely to not get a card.
Sure.
On Adam's side, there isn't too much he can do to improve the matchup. He has Thoughtseizes of his own in the sideboard. It probably would not see those come in there. That's for faster combo decks. He has Cabal Therapies. He could be using that. He could be going on a Disruptive Plan. Other than that, the other cards he has an additional Natural Order, and he has a Progenitus. He can board in that plan if he wants to be more on the Natural Order scheme of things, which that one I would not be surprised to see him do.
Yeah. And the discard is primarily for combo matchups. It's a really big cost for Adam to bring in discard spells because his deck is about building up a density of creatures. He's trying to go off with Glimpse potentially, so adding non-creature spells is a pretty large cost. Especially he wants to bring in the Abrupt Decays just to fight over Umezawa's Jitte specifically. I'm not certain if he wants to bring in the actual discard spells or not. Now, normally you would say, well, Esper Stoneblade's a control deck and discard's very good against it, but Adam's deck, Elves, is kind of a special case. It's a big cost to bring those spells in.
Yeah, well, especially when you're playing a card like Glimpse of Nature. Glimpse really demands that your deck has a critical mass of creatures in it. Every single creature you sideboard out really detracts from your deck's game plan. Especially, Elf, a lot of cards count creatures. And so every time Adam boards out a creature, it has to be for a really good reason. And while Thoughtseize may be fine here, it's not good enough on the surface to just merit bringing in.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, Patrick Sullivan and Matthias Hunt, we're coming to you round 5 of the Legacy Open here in Baltimore. 9 rounds today with 460 players in attendance. And we have Jim Davis up a game with Esper Stoneblade against Adam Warner playing Elves.
Yeah, and we had game 1 actually went to Jim Davis. That's a pretty big coup for the Esper deck to take a game 1 off a combo deck. Elves certainly can win a match winning post-board games, but post-board games are always more difficult for most combo decks in the format.
Yeah, it rarely gets easier. You have to stay true to yourself, so there's only so much room you have to sideboard cards in and out, and a lot of decks are bringing in really specific answers to you. Jim has, for example, Zealous Persecution. I'm sure it's primarily over fighting True Name Nemesis, but it does a lot of work here as well.
Yeah. See both players shuffling up right now for game 2. One thing which I've noticed recently about Elves was a little more of a fringe combo deck a year ago, and it really has risen to prominence over the last year, I would say. Yeah. It's now one of the, I would say, staple combo decks of the format.
Yeah, I think the change to the Legend rule obviously has some amount of impact. I really think it's also a deck that just got tuned over time much better. Of all the decks of Legacy where you look at builds 2 years ago and what they were doing and the types of cards they were playing to where it is now, Elves just got a finer tuning job done to it than many of the other decks. Matt Nass is responsible for a lot of that. He had a lot of success with elves and did a lot to build that deck and explore new avenues, but it has certainly dramatically improved from what it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they certainly don't mirror entity or Emrakul people anymore.
Right, there's very little dead weight in these decks. At some point, people got away from playing natural order altogether, but that leaves you without an explosive game plan in some places. It also leaves you without some outs to some spots as well. So it's been kind of determined that natural order is a card that you want. You want to have access to some awesome finishers, but you want those finishers at least game one to be things that you can actually cast, not things like Emrakul, for example. Sorry, you can cast the Emrakul, but it is incidental.
Right. Games you can cast Emrakul, you've already won in another way.
Right.
So we are underway. Turn 1, Adam will play Deathrite Shaman. This is off of fetch land, so it is a turn 1 mana elf. And he will pass back to Jim Davis. His hand pretty strong. He has enough lands and Green Sun Zenith. And we'll get to see Adam's entire hand as Jim's going to respond to the Thoughtseize. It is 2 more lands, a Quirion Ranger, and 2 Green Sun Zeniths.
So a pretty low impact hand with the exception of those 2 Zeniths, which I expect Jim to take one of. No Cradle, which is good news for Jim as well. So a slower start for Adam.
Yeah, you might need, if Adam's digging for action, he might even have to Green Sun for a Visionary here. You might want to get Visionary Symbiote going. If he draws 1, he'd like to find the other half. Because Jim has enough discard, though, Adam may have to just gamble on which half he will draw and just start firing off a Zenith before it's no longer there. See another land drawn by Adam.
And it appears as though Jim has kept a 1-lander with Ponder and Engineered Explosives, which he has 1 copy of in his main deck. So a slightly greedy keep, but Engineered Explosives plus Thoughtseize has a lot of upside against Adam.
Absolutely. Quirion Ranger made by Adam swings with, or sorry, Deathrite Shaman will exile the Polluted Delta. That's for 1 mana. He has a land for another one. Cracking his own fetch lands just to get lands out of his deck. And it looks like he's going to go ahead and Zenith for 1 here.
And he's walking right into the jaws of this.
His Engineered Explosives.
Yeah.
All right, well, if he gets Wirewood Symbiote, which looks like he's going to, he can avoid the Engineered Explosives to a degree. Mm-hmm. Once he sees it come down, he can start bouncing his own creatures.
Still puts a lot of pressure on Adam to find some action next turn, as his board really doesn't do anything.
Yeah,
it makes mana.
Mm-hmm. It makes a lot of mana. His hand has 2 lands in it. It has utility, but it doesn't actually, it is just 3 1-power creatures when you really look at it. Mm-hmm. Now, Wirewood Symbiote, innocuous on the surface, but one of the most powerful cards in the deck. It can save any of the elves from removal spells. It can recast Elvish Visionaries. The only thing it cannot do is protect itself.
Also does a lot of help fighting against Umezawa's Jitte as well.
All right, so you see off that 1-lander, it's going to be a Ponder from Jim. He sees Stoneforge, land, and Jace. He can have the land, and he actually drew a land this turn, so he can go ahead and take the land here pretty safely.
And Jim is just trying to ensure that he has access to Engineered Explosives next turn.
Yeah, so he's going to go ahead and crack his fetch land, resetting the top of the deck. Look, will most likely play Explosives on 1.
I think he might actually do something like plow the Wirewood Symbiote.
So that then he can make sure that Explosives gets cleans up the rest of the team.
Right, and it cuts out, you know, any potential explosion that Adam can have next turn, or at least reduces a lot of it.
Absolutely. And you are right. The Symbiote will get plowed. Adam back up to 19, but now just 2 1-drops on the board, no more action in his hand, and really at the mercy of a Engineered Explosives next turn. And another land drawn for Adam.
Yeah, that was a spot where something like Natural Order perhaps would have allowed Adam to steal this game, but now he's going to be in a lot of trouble.
All right, 3rd land is Wooded Foothills. And all Adam can really do, he's going to swing the Quirion Ranger, leaving up the fetch land to go ahead and get a Bayou and start shocking with Deathrite Shaman on end step. But Jim able to clear off the board. And this is, as you expected, Engineered Explosives for 1. And that will be charged right up with 1 counter. Primed to deal with both of Adam's creatures, and the 2 mana is there in waiting.
And Jim also has Counterspell in his hand. What he can do is sit this one turn and Explosives end of turn on Adam's turn if he's feeling so inclined.
Yeah, it will cost him 3 life points to make that play, because Adam will get to untap with his creatures. But when you're in Jim's situation, that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, and Jim knows that Adam's pretty light on action, but even from this base, you know, if Jim were to say blow up the Explosives right now, Adam could have used that fetch land, found Dryad Arbor instead, and then he top decks Natural Order and he wins the game, or is very likely to win the game. So Jim is definitely correct in respecting what the Elf deck is capable of, even from this position. Appears to be leaving Counterspell mana up.
Yep, and that's, end step Bayou, shocked Jim down to 13. He's gonna go ahead and get 1 draw here. It's gonna be, well, a Heritage Druid, something I'm not even sure he can cast into this board. But he will start by attacking, see how much damage Jim takes. He's willing to take the full 3 damage. So Jim down to 12 off the attack. 4th land from Adam Warner, and that will probably be all he can do here. That's a 2nd Bayou. So now both Bayous and both Forests from his deck in play. Adam has very few real lands left in his deck. And actually nothing, well, sorry, he has 2 Dryad Arbors left that he can fetch. After that, his fetch lands will be blank.
So you see Adam doing a little shenanigans there with his Quirion, Green Ranger, and his Deathrite Shaman to get a 2nd activation.
And so Jim down to 8. So that slow play, or that patient play on the Explosives did end up costing Jim 5 additional life, so a pretty big cost. However, it meant that Adam couldn't make another creature. And you see Jim, with Stoneforge Mystic and 2 mana up, will be ready to gain that life back, as you can only assume he's going to find Umezawa's Jite.
Yeah. And again, not looking to tap out for Tuning Nemesis or anything. Still respecting the possibility of Natural Order. Just going to get Stoneforge with 2 mana up and try to take down the game this way.
And we see Umezawa's Jite. There it is. And now we put it into Jim's hand. That Jite, once it gets counters on it, really is the lock against Elves. Once it's online, what Elves can do is he has to play a creature and immediately Natural Order it into a Progenitus. That's his answer. But as you said, because Jim has Counterspell in his hand, Jite plus online Jite plus Counterspell should be enough to lock Adam out.
Yeah. It's possible Adam has brought in the Abrupt Decays in his sideboard. It's possible there's a Viridian Shaman still hanging out, but.
All right, draw for turn from Adam is Nettle Sentinel. He'll play that, pass back. And Jim will probably just be fine with this, content to untap. He could counterspell it. I can't imagine he would. Yeah, we are still on Adam's turn. And yeah, that will resolve. Jim untaps for his turn. You see Counterspell, Stoneforge, Swamp, Batterskull, or sorry, Jite, and True Name Nemesis. That's his cards. And land number 5 for Jim means another Stoneforge. And I like that he plays this over the Jite. It's just better with his mana. He can always end step the Jite. Or even end step the Batterskull if he chooses. And since he was committed to leaving up Counterspell both ways, this one just ends up being a better play.
Yeah. And furthermore, you know, he doesn't really want to run his Stoneforge Mystic right into the Nettle Sentinel. It's a little bit better to have the Jite on Batterskull, so it's harder for Adam to block.
Another fetch for Warner. Remember, the only target left in his deck for that fetch land is one of the 2 Dryad Arbors, meaning it cannot create mana this turn. So land and pass from Adam Warner. Finds that white source to do an end step activation of Stoneforge Mystic, and we'll see which equipment he chooses to put down. And you're expecting Batterskull, and it is Batterskull and the Brian Brunduin Germ Token back on the battlefield.
And Jim in the process of locking this up once again, the same way he was able to in the first game.
And 3rd Stoneforge is the draw. We may not see Jite get online this turn, but next turn you can assume it will be online.
It's still pretty risky here for Adam to go for Jite this turn. Although the Batterskull will take him up to a life total where he no longer dies to a single Progenitus hit, if that's a tool that Adam has afforded to him, but still better to err on the side of caution.
Yep, so 14 and 11 are now the life totals. And actually, even if Adam gets Progenitus, well, Jim still can't race a Progenitus, I suppose. Elvish Visionary is the draw for Adam Warner. Casts it, draws. We see Crater Hoof Behemoth as that other card in his hand. And despite having 5 lands, none of them are Gaia's Cradle. There's a Gaia's Cradle in Adam's hand. If everything were untapped right now, he could cast Crater Hoof.
But unfortunately, this is his window to do it because JJ's going to start running rampant on his board starting next turn.
Yeah, he can make Heritage Druid, tap his creatures for 3, fetch a Dryad Arbor, tap a land for a 4th, tap the Cradle for 4, that's 8, make Crater Hoof, untap a Nettle Sentinel, and swing just with the Nettle Sentinel. It's not enough, but it's some damage. Of course, as we know, if he goes for the play, there is a counter spell waiting for that Crater Hoof, so that won't work, but I think that line is what he has to go for.
Yeah.
And I think we're about to see that get executed. Heritage Druid into play for the turn. Verdant Catacombs is going to sacrifice. Remember, this does have to find Dryad Arbor. So he doesn't have a real tappable land. Fortunately for him, that still makes mana because it's a creature, and he's going to tap a Gaia's Cradle, so he still actually gets 8 here.
Jake Taft and Tyler Arndt to the side.
But this is all of Adam's resources here.
Yeah, so Cradle taps for 4.
Standard open trials waiting for him.
The Elves, 5, 6, 7. The Bayou for 8. And here's the attempt at Crater Hoof. And untapped Nettle Sentinel. And you can just see shuffled to the front, and we have Counterspell.
All that for just a mere
All that for
counterspell.
2 mana. And now Adam is stuck. He has no cards left. And Jim will put down Umezawa's Jite on end step. And just as we saw last game, we're going to see that Germ token pick up a Jite and a Batterskull.
Jim also draws Zealous Persecution this turn.
Actually, that's a
that's a
pre-verdict.
pre-verdict,
Yeah, but I mean, pretty much just as bad.
A nice insurance policy to have here.
Sure, yeah. In case this Jite Batterskull doesn't kill everything, which it will, then he could cast Supreme Verdict. He's going to just swing the team. I think he's actually going to go ahead and go for the Verdict here.
Yeah, I mean, he's still in a position where he can't kill everything this turn with the Jite, so Natural Order is still something of a concern.
And now he doesn't have a counterspell. He'd rather take that out off the board. He knows that Adam has no cards in hand, so Adam can't draw both a creature and a Natural Order. So we'll just go ahead and Verdict away the board. Does leave him without a creature, but he does have both a Stoneforge in hand and a Batterskull on the battlefield, so given enough time, Jim will find another creature to put all this equipment on.
Yes. His true name in hand, in fact, so he can just set this up next turn.
And it's Heritage Druid for Adam. There's other things. Elves, not the best top decking strategy.
Really only Natural Order, and in some places your big stuff.
Yeah, in some places, Green Sun Zenith. You can either tap deck into Natural Order, or you can tap deck into Symbiote Visionary. Those are your real only reloads. And we see Heritage Druid, top deck for Adam. It's going to come into play. And we're back over to Jim. And he has, well, okay, not really a draw here, but I don't think he needs additional cards at the moment. And Stoneforge will grab that final piece of equipment. That final piece is Sword of War, Fire and Ice, which actually has been boarded out, so it's nothing. It's just a 1/2, but 1/2 is just fine. And just all the creatures for Jim: True Name Nemesis and Stoneforge Mystic. And this does actually give Adam an out to top deck a top deck Natural Order right now.
Well, unfortunately, Jim Davis has a 3-mana Progenitus in play, which is going to pretty easily erase even actual Progenitus.
Because it's gaining so much life. Yeah, if True Name with Jite and Batterskull will actually outrace Progenitus. So Adam, I believe without an out here, you could say. And Jim will just be sure he will okay, and he hits an elf. All right. And now True Name Nemesis has been activated, turning into quite the monster. Picks up Umazawa's Jite. Swings in for 4. Adam goes to 4. 2 counters on True Name. One of them kills Heritage Druid. We pass back, and this should be it for Jim Davis taking the match. And Thoughtseas, he will. Jim shows it. I think that Jim, as he plays Thoughtseas, shows his hand and concedes. So concession from Adam. So Jim Davis up to 5-0. Adam Warner falls to